Money is losing power, but power never disappears. It transforms, and the next phase of global influence won't be decided by currency, but by control. For the first time in modern history, governments aren't trying to fix money. They're trying to replace it, not with gold, not with a stronger currency, but with a system that gives them something far more valuable: direct control. Every system has a foundation. For decades, ours was simple: money. Money created incentives. Money moved economies. Money defined who had power and who didn't. But money only works as long as people believe it works. And right now, the cracks are visible. Inflation rising, debt accelerating, trust eroding. The financial engine that once sustained global power is losing strength, not because it has ended, but because it is no longer sufficient to keep the system stable. And when that happens, something predictable and at the same time dangerous comes into play: the growth of control. Governments refuse to lose power. Large institutions refuse to lose relevance. And when they realize that money is failing as a primary tool of command, they don't try to reinforce the money. They replace the mechanism. They migrate from value to control, from incentives to supervision, from trust to monitoring. This movement doesn't happen by decree. It happens out of necessity. A system that can no longer function solely through currency and interest rates seeks alternatives. And these alternatives always involve some form of tracking, regulation, and limitation. This is how governments maintain order when money loses its original purpose. And if you look closely, you'll see it's already happening. Fewer and fewer economic decisions depend on the citizen. They increasingly depend on the approval of authorities, digital systems, central banks, and restrictive policies. Before, the money you earned and spent was yours alone. Now it's becoming a sign, a code, a data trail that can be analyzed, blocked, released, or conditioned. This is not the future. It's the present. Transaction limits, withdrawal restrictions, automatic monitoring, preventive roadblocks, tracked transfers, accounts frozen without warning. All these measures emerged as protection or security, but they represent the first step in a silent transformation: the gradual replacement of financial power with regulatory power. In other words, when money is no longer sufficient to govern, the government starts using tools that don't depend on money. And this transition creates a paradox. People believe the system is becoming more modern, when in reality, it is becoming more controlled. It's not about technology. It's about surveillance. It's not about digitization. It's about centralization. It's not about efficiency. It's about who decides what you can and cannot do with your own money. Some see this as progress, others such as risk. In practice, it's inevitable. Whenever the currency loses credibility, the system compensates by taking away freedom. And this is not a theory. It's a historical pattern. Roman empires, Chinese dynasties, medieval European civilizations, great industrial powers, they all followed the same cycle: weakening of the currency, tightening of controls. And today, we are seeing this cycle reborn, not in one country, but across the entire planet. For the first time in the modern era, monetary fragility is global, and the control in response is also becoming global. But most people don't notice this change, because it doesn't come with sirens, warnings, or dramatic headlines. It comes in the form of convenience. More apps, less physical money. More convenience, less privacy. More integration, less autonomy. This is how the transition begins: quiet, seductive, and inevitable. For most of modern history, power flowed through markets, not governments. It was corporations, banks, investors, trade networks, and private capital that dictated the rhythm of the global economy. Governments regulated, but did not lead. They monitored the flow, they did not create it. Money flowed through individual decisions, millions of people buying, selling, investing, and moving resources according to their own choices. But when trust in the financial system begins to falter, this dynamic changes, and it changes silently but profoundly. Because markets depend on freedom to function, governments depend on control. And in times of weakness, whoever has the most power to impose control is the one who takes command. What we are seeing today is exactly that. Power is shifting away from the market and back to the government. Not because it was decided democratically, not because it was discussed openly, but that's because the system is designed to react this way when its foundation begins to crack. When currencies become unstable, governments don't allow the market to resolve the situation. They intervene, they freeze accounts, they limit withdrawals, they are closing banks due to a temporary emergency. They block international transfers. They restrict financial operations based on technical justifications. This happened in the United States in 1933. It happened in Europe in 2008. It happened in Greece in 2015. This happens routinely in emerging countries. And now it's becoming the norm, not the exception. Why? Because markets only function when there is trust. Governments function even without it. In times of stability, the market leads. In times of instability, the government dominates. Currently, we are in a period where instability has ceased to be an event and has become a permanent state. This change became even more evident with the advancement of digital payment technologies. On one hand, people believe they are gaining agility. On the other hand, governments see a rare opportunity, the chance to transform physical money, decentralized and anonymous, into something completely traceable and controllable. The transition is not accidental, it is designed. Each new, super-practical system that eliminates paper money brings, along with convenience, a higher level of oversight. Previously, physical money guaranteed autonomy. You decided how to use it, where, when, with whom, and nobody needed to approve it. Now most transactions go through digital filters, banking systems, payment gateways, financial APIs, private platforms connected directly to regulatory authorities, and this connectivity gives the government a power it never had before. The ability to allow or deny a real-time transaction. This changes everything, because when the government no longer controls the value of money, it tries to control the flow of the money. And controlling the flow means controlling behavior. Want to limit your purchases? Just adjust the system. Want to prevent withdrawals? Just block. Do you want to restrict spending on certain items? You just need to program the algorithm. Do you want to freeze an account without a full legal process? One click is enough. The financial system is ceasing to be a spontaneous network based on trust and is transforming into a centralized network based on authorization. And this type of network no longer reflects the market. It reflects the government. The question now is not with, this change will continue, but yes, how far can she go? There was a time when money moved without leaving footprints. Cash could be exchanged hand to hand. Gold could be stored privately. Wealth could exist outside of institutions, outside of banks, beyond the reach of governments. That was the function of physical money, to offer autonomy, autonomy to buy, autonomy for storage, autonomy to exist outside of databases. That era is ending. Quietly, financial anonymity ceased to be a feature of the system and became a threat to the system. What once represented economic freedom now represents regulatory risk. And when governments identify risk, they do what they've always done. They eliminate the space where risk can hide. It all started with measures that seemed harmless: withdrawal limits, mandatory declarations, tracking international transfers, control of cash deposits. Each of these measures in isolation seemed sensible, justified, and temporary. But together they form a pattern. The system is eliminating any possibility of unsupervised financial transactions. And technology has given the government something that no authority in history has ever had: full visibility. Each digital payment generates a record. Every transfer leaves a trail. Each purchase generates a piece of data. And financial data is more valuable than money itself, because they allow something that no physical currency has ever allowed: predict behavior. Banks, companies, and governments don't just want to know how much you spend. They want to know as, where, when, and how often. And from that, they can infer a pattern. And based on the pattern, they can predict decisions. And based on the forecast, they can control outcomes. This is no longer a value-based system. It's a behavior-based system. A system where money functions less as wealth and more as an analytical tool. Today, when you use digital money, you're not just paying. You are providing information. And this information is stored, processed, cross-referencing with other databases, sold, shared, evaluated by algorithms that don't understand context, but do understand patterns. And when financial patterns become predictable, the next step is inevitable. Conditioning behavior, not directly, not explicitly, but as a filter, as a limit, as authorization. Do you want to buy something out of the ordinary? It can be signaled. Do you want to move a larger amount of money? It can be blocked. Do you want to transfer to a specific region or country? It may be prohibited. Do you want to spend money on something that is not approved? The transaction may simply not go through. And this, technically, already happens, even without a fully digital currency, even without CBDC, even without new laws. The infrastructure is ready. The capability exists. The system can already decide which transactions to allow or deny without you even noticing. The only thing missing is the official justification, and justifications always emerge in times of crisis. It's for your safety. It's to prevent fraud. It's to protect the economy. It's temporary. Nothing is more permanent than temporary measures. Financial anonymity didn't die by accident. He was eliminated by design. Because in the new system, money is no longer a tool for freedom. It's a tool for control. Trust used to be the foundation of the entire financial system. People trusted that money had value. Governments trusted that banks eram solventes. Businesses were confident that payments would come through. Citizens trusted that their property was safe. This trust wasn't perfect, but it worked. It allowed economies to expand, markets to grow, and societies to function without supervision excessiva. But once trust weakens, the system doesn't try to rebuild it. It replaces it, and the replacement is always the same: control. Control does not require trust. Control does not depend on stability. Control doesn't need to convince. He simply imposes his will. That is why when money loses credibility, governments fail to present solutions that restore autonomy to the citizen. They propose measures that concentrate power within the state itself. Because without trust, the system ceases to be participatory and becomes authoritarian, albeit silently. This transition is not immediately visible. It doesn't arrive through dramatic decrees or threatening speeches. It arrives through improvements, regarding new technologies, regarding modernizations, regarding security updates. Control doesn't invade. He integrates. First, transactions cease to be anonymous. Then, they cease to be free. Finally, they cease to be optional. At first, the system only observes. Then he begins to analyze. Next, he goes on to recommend, and when recommendations cease to be sufficient, he begins to decide. It's always the same: conditional freedom, supervised freedom, substituted freedom. And this substitution happens based on a very simple argument. Trust is gone, so we need to set limits. Withdrawal limits, purchase limits, movement limits, usage limits. Setting limits to protect you from yourself. But each limit creates space for one more, and each new layer of control reduces the need for trust, and a system that doesn't require trust can eventually operate without freedom. This is the critical point that almost no one notices. A collapse of trust does not lead to chaos, it leads to control. And control, when it reaches a certain level, no longer needs trust to function. It is self-sustaining. This means that when the system fails to maintain monetary stability, it compensates by artificially increasing stability through rigid governance, automatic surveillance, and programmed rules. Money ceases to be a means of exchange and becomes an instrument of obedience. And when that happens, the economy stops responding to citizens and starts responding to algorithms that decide what is allowed. The signs of this transformation are already everywhere. Payment approved or not authorized. Account temporarily blocked. Transaction under review. Card denied due to security reasons. These terms, repeated daily, are not just technical messages. These are subtle reminders that control is increasing and trust is disappearing. And when control completely replaces trust, the economy ceases to be an open field and becomes a system of conditioning. A system where every action is monitored, evaluated, and potentially restricted. A system that no longer depends on the goodwill of the citizen. It depends solely on his obedience, and the question that remains is simple, yet profound. If control replaces trust, what can replace money? Money once determined power. Wealth determined influence. Those with more resources could negotiate, buy, expand, and survive. For centuries, this was the rule. Power followed money. But this cycle is coming to an end, and what is emerging in its place is something much simpler and much more dangerous: access. The new power is not what you possess. This is what you can use, and, most importantly, what you could lose if you don't obey. In a control-based system, money ceases to be the foundation and becomes merely a layer, an interface, an appearance of autonomy that only works as long as the system allows it. True power then lies in the hands of those who control it. Access. Access to banks, access to payment methods, access to services, access to energy, access to transportation, access to digital communication, access to records and identities, access to data. This change transforms everything. Because when power is based on access, it becomes instantaneous and reversible. It can be granted or revoked with a command. No more need for lengthy processes, legal battles, or physical interventions. Simply turn off the digital switch. And in a world where everything is connected, shutting off access is more effective than confiscating money, faster than freezing accounts, more precise than regulating markets. It is no coincidence that the financial systems of the future are being designed around digital wallets, programmable currencies, unique identities, and smart boundaries. This is not technological progress, it's control architecture. The question is no longer, how much do you have? And it becomes, what are you allowed to do with what you have? Access redefines economic freedom, redefines private property. It even redefines the idea of individual sovereignty. You can have money, but you may not have access. And without access, money is useless. It's just a number on the screen, ready to disappear if the system decides you no longer have permission to use it. And here is the central point that the video needs to make clear. When power depends on access, power ceases to be distributed. It becomes concentrated. It focuses on institutions. It focuses on systems. It focuses on algorithms. It focuses on who controls the infrastructure, not the wealth. And this concentration has an inevitable effect. She turns behavior into currency, obedience in credit, compliance with permission. In the new system, whoever controls access controls everything. Because control doesn't require force. You don't need weapons, you don't need soldiers. All you need is one button. The future of power will not be decided by who accumulates the most wealth, but by who has the capacity to authorize, to deny or limit what others can do. Money was power. Access is the new currency. Money didn't disappear. It just stopped being the source of power. And when money fails, power doesn't collapse. It migrates. First to institutions, then to algorithms, and finally to the people who control access. The new system won't ask for your trust. It will demand your compliance, because in the next phase of global power, you won't be defined by how much you own, but by what you're allowed to use. This isn't about the future, it's already happening. Slowly, quietly, inevitably. If you want to understand where power is moving, follow the access, not the currency. Subscribe to World Power Explained. Here, we don't chase trends. We reveal the systems that shape them.